America's various conflicts and obligations in the Middle East have, by some estimates, since 9/11, cost this country about $6 trillion. For perspective, that's more than the market caps of Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, and Google, plus all the student loan and credit card debt in the entire country combined. Yeah. And in return for that, America got weaker and more divided, not stronger. There are still government factions, by the way, pushing America toward more wars in Syria and Iran. Why? Well, in a weekend interview with Fox's Steve Hilton, the president gave a remarkably clear and honest answer to that. Watch this.
Don't kid yourself. You do have a military-industrial complex. They do like war. You know, in Syria with the caliphate. So I wipe out 100% of the caliphate. I say I want to bring our troops back home. The place went crazy. They want to keep, you have people here in Washington, they never want to leave.
They never want to leave. And so we're still there. Douglas Macgregor is a retired U.S. Army colonel and author of the fantastic book Margin of Victory. He joins us tonight. Colonel, thanks very much for coming on.
Sure.
So I don't think I've never seen a president be that honest about anything, actually. He announces we're pulling all American troops out of Syria. As he just noted, the place went crazy, the place being Washington, and we're still there. What happened and why?
Well, the president, by now, I think, understands that he's surrounded inside the White House and within the administration by people who are part of this bipartisan globalist elite. In other words, the inner circle of advisors, whether it's John Bolton or Mr. Pompeo from the State Department or any number of other people, along with the general officers, the 4 stars, and the senior intelligence operatives and officers, all of whom have risen to great rank over the last 20 years as a result of their participation in these strategic failures that you're discussing, are absolutely committed to stopping any change. They're defending in their minds what's left of the post-war liberal order that really crumbled back in the early 90s with the dissolution of the Soviet Union. So the notion of removing anyone from anywhere is anathema to those people. And then finally, there's the possibility that if you start withdrawing forces, which, by the way, in most cases are not needed where they are today at all, 2 things will happen. First of all, you're going to erode the support for the authorization for the use of military force and this slush fund, this $200 billion overseas contingency fund that is part of this massive spending exercise that Congress loves. And then secondly, you're going to watch as the various actors in places like Syria and Iraq and elsewhere, Russians, Syrians, Iranians, Turks, and others, all fall out with each other, which normally you would regard as a strategically positive development.
Yes.
But we seem to want to force cohesion on them, give them a reason to stay together, and essentially ally against us.
The reason being opposition to us. Watching the president say that as clearly as he did it give you a sense of a man being kind of held captive almost by the people around him? I wanted to pull out the troops from Syria. They wouldn't let me. That's really what he's saying.
Yeah, it's depressing. 2 things the president should remember. At the end of the day, his is the voice that counts in the White House.
Yes.
He is the commander-in-chief. He's under no obligation to take more bad advice, to drink more poison from the poison well. And when he looks at these people, when he looks at the 4 stars that march in there, active and retired, when he looks at the various advisors that he's got on his staff, not just John Bolton, all of them, he needs to remember something. All of these people have put into practice something Winston Churchill once said. Success consists of moving from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. They've taken this to an extreme, and he needs to get rid of them.
I'm sorry to laugh, but that's such a perfect quote in this case. Do you think that there is hope for getting out, just to pick a small example, of Syria?
Of course, absolutely. But when Mr. Bolton runs in the room or the chairman of the Joint Chiefs says, oh, no, you can't do that, the world will end, he has to say, thank you for your interest in national defense. We're leaving. And see what happens.
Yeah.
And I think what he'll see is what we discussed, the falling out of the various actors that will begin to tangle
with each other. It's not just them. It's the entire on-air staff of MSNBC and CNN and Max Boot and the rest of them. Yeah. Colonel Macgregor, thank you very much. Great to see you tonight. Well, recently, tensions, as you know, if you've been watching, have risen between the U.S. and Iran. On this program, we've asked a couple times the obvious question, which is, what purpose would a war with Iran serve? How would it help the United States? There's no obvious way that it would. But here is one conflict with Iran that could at least help a few Americans, conceivably. In 1983, 240 U.S. servicemen were murdered by suicide bombers in Beirut, Lebanon, the barracks bombings that year. The family members of those murdered servicemen have been seeking justice ever since. Several court rulings have found that Iran's government was linked to the attack, but Iran's government, of course, has refused to honor any judgment against it. There is a pool of money, $1.7 billion, that was apparently laundered by a European bank. Currently, the fate of this money is tied up in the federal courts. The Supreme Court has asked the Trump administration to weigh in on what should happen to this money. That was months ago. So far, the administration hasn't weighed in. They still haven't submitted an amicus brief supporting justice for the Beirut families. So here's a question. Why not? Could it be that as long as those families don't have justice, it gives John Bolton another justification to bomb the country of Iran? We're not sure. We don't know. We can't know. But we do know that releasing that money into the hands of the widows and survivors of those Marines who were murdered would be a good thing for America. Probably ought to do it.